Welcome, everybody, to episode 75 of the Corner Blue. It's been a bit, but here we are back with the first podcast of 2025. Hugo, how are you doing?
Pretty good. We've dealt with a lot in terms of you know where I live. LA had some massive fires at the beginning of the year. They came very close to where I live. So glad to see the gone. Unfortunately, a lot of people lost their homes. And but in terms of what this podcast is about, I'm really looking forward to everything that this year is bringing for La Selecta at different levels from senior to youth.
Yeah, and sometimes we have lulls in terms of news coming out of El Salvador, especially with La Selecta not competing for months at a time. But I'd say we can definitely lead off today's podcast with good news with La Zulita, the U17 team qualifying to its respective World Cup in Qatar to be played later in November. And I'd have to say this news is just a pleasant surprise, something that came under the radar for me. Basically, the only news or hype leading into that tournament was the Jamaican Salvi kid that chose to play for Jamaica. And other than that, there was really no news or hype about this team going into the tournament. I per se wasn't able to watch many of the games due to being at work and the schedule, but I know you were watching. So, what were your impressions of this team now that our hopes and dreams are resting on the shoulders of these teenagers now?
First of all, I think it's important to let the kids be kids, right? It's a big deal for Salvadorian soccer. I think I want to start there. And at the same time, it's also important to acknowledge that the format changed and allowed for double the amount of teams to go. So, with that being said, I think that I like some of the things I saw, especially what we saw against Jamaica, because if you really bring it down to one important game, and it was Jamaica, without disrespecting the other teams, I think those games were fell under the category of games that we had to win, and everybody kind of knew that the game against Jamaica was going to be the important game, the one that we had to win in order to go through, and it came down to that. And I think what I saw, first of all, is a team that, with the short amount of time that they had to work, that's probably why we didn't hear much about it, because they kind of put the team together in the last 2 months, and they did manage to get four friendly matches where the performance was not the best, but games are always important because they provide that opportunity to create a cohesive team, for players to know each other, to get to go through all of those mistakes on those friendly games, so that you don't take them to the official tournament. So I really like how the team seemed pretty well balanced throughout the lines, and it was a team that regrouped easily in a very organized way. When we lost the ball, we didn't leave a lot of open spaces, which is something that it's crucial against teams that tend to be faster than us, more physical than us, where in the past we've always suffered when those things happen to us. So I think it's an interesting group of players. It's a good combination of players that from that category, that some of them play abroad and some other ones play locally. There's a few FESA players. It kind of reminded me a little bit of the 2013 team, because we're kind of seeing some similarities with FESA supporting the team, and having a few players there. So it's going to be an interesting team. And for me, the most important thing about this is how having this tournament every year. I think it's going to be a yearly World Cup now, and having more spots for CONCACAF, it serves as a motivation for the 14-year-olds and the 13-year-olds that are coming behind those U17s, and that exposure in the World Cup can lead to potential new prospects for the senior team. So I think it's a great, it should be taken as a great motivator for the upcoming generations.
Yeah, I think that kind of just forces too of a continuous development of players because usually, like what happened with this team, that things didn't get going until right before the start of the tournament. And one thing about El Salvador's history is that there's always a lack of preparation. The teams that break through, I think it's more because if you want to get romantic about it, there's just this level of inevitability to these teams that they have so many factors against them, but ultimately somehow the right group of players click all together, get going, and somehow break through and qualify, whether it's to the 1970 World Cup, the 82 World Cup, La Azulita of 2013, and now most recently this Azulita, the under 17s. And I think that has to be corrected along the way. But whenever we do break through in this way, I mean, you can't, it's hard not to get emotional or excited about those moments that, despite everything against you or that the way that things are organized or run are not conducive to these moments of success, and yet they come. I think that's why most of us as fans are always clinging on to those moments of inevitability because we don't have something in place yet that is going to develop and produce and maintain a certain amount of quality in our system to not guarantee moments like these because we need to be humble. It's sports. You never know what can happen, but at least feel like you're competing and vying for these tournaments. And I think a qualification like this is just one of those fresh reminders of that, it is a sport that we can excel at. It is a sport that we're passionate about and for various reasons. And congratulations to the squad, to the staff for something like this. I hope these incidents aren't isolated moving forward. This is something that, like you said, if it's going to be played every year, hopefully we can start seeing and celebrating more qualifications. It'll push the need or it'll just push the need to bring squads together because if these tournaments weren't played, I the way the system is right now, we wouldn't have a squad just hanging out and meeting up and training and playing together and having friendlies. These tournaments kind of push for you to create these squads. And if it's something that's continuous, it's inevitable that, these teams will be playing throughout, the years rather than take 2-3 periods off where there is no U17 and then maybe a couple months before the qualification starts, then you assemble your squad. So that's good news all around to me. And I think now we can pass, speaking of inevitable, we can pass on to the next topic that was coming out of El Salvador recently, which it's definitely sad to hear when it comes to Norberto Huezo el Pájaro dealing with some health issues. There were publications of him passing away 2 days ago, which then were retracted. And on social media, people were saying that he is still in the battle for his life. Reports have been, murky to say the least on that, but definitely we feel for him and his family. I think he is one of those inevitable ones. When we use that word inevitable, he came from a generation of players that had so much against them, yet he was able to break through, not only have a career abroad, have a great career locally, and reach that mountaintop with the national team. And make it to the World Cup in 1982. And I think he's one of the greats to ever put the kit on. He's had a rough couple of years, these last couple of years. And we definitely hope that whatever the status is that, whether it's he rests in peace or he's able to make a recovery. I know on my part, I'm sending positive energy. Because yeah, rough couple of years, and he's definitely one of the legends.
Yeah, same here. Positive energy, positive vibes to El Pájaro Hueso. Like you said, I mean, I couldn't have said it better than you. He's one of our historic players, probably right below El Mágico Gonzalez, potentially, in terms of what he did as a player. So yeah, thoughts and prayers with him and his family, and hopefully he can come out of this one. And yeah, and God only knows what he has in place for him, and hopefully, if his destiny is to continue on this world, hopefully he could get the right treatment. And I know that he was needing blood transfusions, and they were looking for blood donation. So hopefully there is an abundance of the type of blood that he needs, and that can help him recover.
And moving on from that, some news when it comes to La Selecta has come out recently. It seems like finally there's light at the end of the tunnel in terms of getting the bylaws of La FESFUT to align with the laws of the Salvadoran state, something that has taken years to happen, whether it was during Hugo Carrillo's tenure, then the normalizadora that lasted a couple days, then the normalizadora that lasted a couple years, and now the most recent one that we have at La FESFUT. There was a press conference, I think it was a week ago, in conjunction with Indes and Yamil Bukele, mentioning that they were 80% of the way to ratify the bylaws or align them with the national laws in terms of being able to function within the parameters of the state without the state imposing too much on the federation bylaws, which would, in if that were to happen, the FESFUT would have issues with FIFA or being recognized by FIFA, because FIFA likes to have a certain degree of separation of state interference with its associated federations. So it's good to hear. It was curious to hear that they specifically mentioned that within a couple of months of working together, the new board with Indes, that they had been able to accomplish 80% of the job, and that with the previous administration, under 2 years, that supposedly, quote, that they hadn't been able to get the same amount of work done. So in terms of efficiency, I think it's good. Whether or not that's true, whatever beef there was or constraints or issues, I think what is most important is that by come April, that the job is finally done, that there's an opening to the gateway into Salvadoran football, because what has been occurring the last few decades, obviously it has not worked. So I think what we can see coming from that is a new board will be elected. I don't know when, but we have the clock ticking towards June. So a lot has been up in the air as a consequence to that. The microciclos, the infamous microciclos, there's been more news or polemics based off of El Salvador not being able to get some training camps in before their March friendlies. It's a delicate issue that I feel like has been twisted one way and another in the media in El Salvador. I guess trying to and no matter what the perspective is, I think they've been able to create some sort of turbulence, in the sense that you have the domestic league pitting itself yet once again against the national team coach of the moment, which has been a battle that's occurred endlessly throughout El Salvador's history. And I think here's yet another example of interests clashing and players not being able to get time on the pitch and, you know, building off of chemistry, creating cohesiveness, and being able to just iron the kinks out. June is right around the corner, and the team still has yet to get together, and we're almost towards the end of February. Um, it's a sensitive time. Uh, a lot of comments have been made back and forth throughout social media and in reports coming out of El Salvador. I think it just seems like the air is a little thick and tense. Well, I know you're far away from it all. What are your expectations or hopes when it comes to this situation, knowing that La Selecta has a couple friendlies that are supposed to occur in March and June is right around the corner?
Yeah, I think that we would all love to see the national team having more camps and training and prepare for what's coming up in June. I don't know the ins and outs. I think that every coach of any national team would love to have their players and be able to train with them and have friendly matches. So I don't think this is a situation of the coach not really wanting to do his part. I mean, again, this is just my observation from far away. Um, the positive thing is that there's friendlies, that there's two friendlies, uh, pretty good quality friendlies coming up. Hopefully those can happen. I what I've heard is that the Dynamo game is confirmed and then the other one is not yet. That's what I just saw on news outlets and social media.
Same. Sorry
And
to interrupt, but for now, the friendly versus the Dynamo is going to be on March 19th.
right. And then a couple days later, they should have another one. But from last I heard, it was unknown the venue or something like that along those lines. So I mean, for me, just leaving the polemic aside, because as we know, we've seen this that for some very strange reason, whenever we're coming up to crucial, important moments, instead of coming together and supporting the national team to have a good performance like what we all want, there just seems to be different sectors, whether it's media, whether it's a league or whatever, that is not really working together towards the same goal. Uh, so, sometimes I feel like, well, we should probably believe about 10% of what we read on social media because we don't really know all the details about the different situations and what's going on. And we do know the history of what happens in El Salvador when it comes to loaning the players to the national team. And there's always something. So for me, I focus on the positive, and I think that having those two matches, it's a positive thing. Hopefully, they could get more games in before June, and I'm looking forward to them. Hopefully, one of them is in LA. I don't know if that's going to be confirmed, but I'm looking forward to watching the senior team back in action.
Yeah, I think what's happened is kind of like a microcosm of what always happens throughout qualifying campaigns is there's never a unity in the structure or the program or the different branches of football in El Salvador, and ultimately leads to logistical nightmares because of the different interests involved. And then in the under the shadow of that, we have the Azulita qualifying, where it shows like, oh, despite this disorganization, this dysfunctionality, sometimes you can achieve, results. I think the only thing we can do is just sit back and wait and see where we get within April and June at administrative level. I think that's going to be the biggest factor heading into um, the biggest factor in terms of whether this team will have any sort of stability in terms of facing the qualifiers come June and then closing out in September, if we make it to the next round. I think the only thing we have, the factors that we have in favor are Doniga has his core squad. So I think that is important to have established despite not having time together leading into March. And then also the format of the tournament, I think leaves the door open, to getting to the next round. I think the defining match will be against Suriname, who we know has a plethora of talent and players playing in elite leagues in Europe. But per usual, uh, we got to get our shit together, Not me personally, but I feel like it's just the modus operandi continues, and it continues to destabilize. And at this point, yeah, I really want to see the new board in place, this little transition period of 3+ years over, and seeing where this team can move forward to. And so yeah, so we'll see if the friendlies happen in March. I think, you just like with the Youth World Cup, when you have competition, you force competition and the teams to get together, only good things can happen. Hopefully we get more friendlies leading into June. We're obviously keeping our eye on some of the injured players that have had time to recuperate. I recently saw photos of Pablito Puñed training. It looks like he's passing the ball. I just saw footage of his team that was recently competing in the UEFA conference against Panathinaikos. They got a good first leg in, a second leg they were eliminated, but I think Pablito's up and running. I don't know what level of his recovery he's in, but it's great to see him on the pitch with cleats on and touching the ball. That's someone to keep your eye out for in terms of June. And then Enrico, we still are waiting to see if he's made a full recovery or not, but that's another player that we're keeping our eye on to see if he can be a piece to the puzzle come June. So there's things to look forward to. There's a lot of question marks as always, but I think we're used to that. We're used to that as Salvadoran soccer fans. And I think now we can close out with another topic, Urul. So Fito Celaya recently announced his retirement, played his testimonial match, I guess you could call it, with Alianza. A figure that at the beginning brought a lot of optimism, a lot of admiration, someone that seemed to represent a new generation of players being able to bring their talent beyond our El Salvador's borders to establish themselves in leagues beyond the region. Performed well at a national team level. Had a promising career ahead of him, yet wound up being caught up in the issue with the Maños, yet was only suspended for a while and was able to reestablish himself as one of the most prominent strikers in the local league in El Salvador. So he retires. I feel like, there's mixed feelings when it comes to speaking of the players that were involved in that whole episode. Obviously the way it was conducted was a little circusy in terms of, the suspensions being handed out and the players not being able to speak out for themselves in a formal setting, at least. But when it comes to the figure of Fito, what do you feel, or what does Fito represent to you?
To me personally, no, I mean, in the Salvadorian football world, I think it's inevitable to not acknowledge him as possibly the last most successful player out of El Salvador, or the one of our best, probably the best player that has come out of El Salvador in the last 10 years. I mean, it's just I think it's a reality that, I mean, Cheo is there, obviously. Cheo for me has been like the big, one of the most difference makers in the national team. Um, from the midfield up, he could carry the team on his shoulders. But in terms of forwards, Fito has been our best forward. I mean, leaving aside the what happened outside of the field, even though it potentially happened inside of the field, but you know what I'm talking about. He could have done more. Of course, we all wonder what he could have done had he done things differently, had he made better choices with the way he took care of his of the most important tool that a soccer player has, which is their body. Because when he went to Russia, he was ripping it over there, and he had the unfortunate knee injury. And then after that, we didn't see his best version. He did. I mean, at a local level, he did. He was, what he used to be prior to going to Russia. But I think in the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, I don't want to exaggerate, he was just the shadow of who he used to be. And it's kind of like you always imagine what he used to do, and you always think this is what this player can do. But then at some point, your body doesn't really allow you to do those things anymore. So I feel like, if he had made different choices, maybe he could have played a little longer. But there's no doubt that he represents probably our most dangerous striker in the last 10 years, that we've had in the national team. Not to say that we are not having other forwards who are could potentially be there, but what he could do on the field, is just he was a difference maker. And you always have those players that that at any point they could do something to change the outcome of a game, and he was one of those players.
Yeah, I'd say as a striker, his movements, he's one of the most unorthodox players that I've seen, but he do these random movements or plays that just made sense for him and just how explosive he was from the get-go. I remember his debut against Haiti, where he just came out of nowhere and let's select the one. I think it was 5-1 if I'm not mistaken. And then just since then, just how explosive he was, leading up to his stint in Russia. And like you said, if it weren't for that injury, who knows how things may have gone along for him in Europe. I think that was like the big defining moment in his career where he had those hurdles on the way. Physically, I think the Manos did not help after that as well. And I think he blossomed in a league that held him up too. The local league held him up, and I think he reciprocated. It's just unfortunate that towards the later years of his career, I feel like he could have um, handled things differently in terms of potential call-ups to the national team, fitness, the stints that he had abroad, whether it was in Celaya in Mexico or his stint in LAFC. Um, it just seemed that he became to rely a lot on being comfortable within the National League. And I would have hoped for him the talent that he had, that he would have been able to exploit it abroad. But like you said, I think when it comes to the raw talent and those decisive games early on in the national team and what he displayed in Gold Cups qualifiers, I think he's at the top when it comes to the strikers that we've had since, the Arce basically. He just didn't have that longevity or consistency abroad as the Arce had. And I think we're still looking to fill those shoes, those voids, in that position. To know that you have someone as lethal as Celaya was at one point, but you're starting to see the rise of a new generation. And I think it's only healthy now that the slate is a lot more open or cleaner for new nines to emerge that are being developed in the league. Because this is the first time in a while where, you can make arguments that there's at least 3 or 4 candidates of locally developed and based players that can vie for that 9 spot. And before, there was just an immediate look to Fito as the 9, and if he wasn't there, there's something wrong with the coach. So I think he leaves a positive legacy where, we can have a 9 of that caliber. And I think now that he's retired, there's that opening, and you see the new talents emerging. Your Steven Vasquez's, your Emerson Mauricio. I think his name is El Tanque Mejia, right? If I'm not mistaken, out of Metapan.
Esquivel.
Esquivel. Yeah, my
Esquivel.
bad. Yeah, El Tanque Esquivel. Obviously, you have the Heels vying for that position. So I think we're seeing a renaissance of that 9, that striker that we haven't had since Fito. He left the bar high. And I feel like it's been a good 10 years since anyone's been able to unquestionably be that 9. When you thought of La Selecta during Fito's peak and his upcoming years, you knew he was the 9. And we haven't had that since. I would say we had a little bit of that with Brian Heen, but I'd say now, the table's set for a good, healthy competition at that position. It's not just, we only can rely on one set individual. All right, and I think we'll close out with that. I think we had enough to talk about, considering the huge gap between the last FIFA windows. We only have stuff to look forward to. There's a lot of uncertainty out there, but despite that uncertainty, the usual drama, it's been refreshing to get that positive news of the U17 squad qualifying. And again, want to congratulate the squad, the team, for their accomplishment. And we look forward to watching your matches in November. Thanks, Hugo, for joining today on the Corner Blue. Thanks to everyone for listening, and we'll be here soon once more developments come out of El Salvador. So have a good one.